Hello and welcome back to Hotline Sehwani's interview series. Before getting into today's episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, follow us at Hotline Sehwani and let us know who else we should interview on this series. Special thanks to Junie for being our special guest on today's episode. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Back again with Hotline Sehwani, continuing our voice acting / actor series as we continue to do more interviews with characters and actors you know. Kind of turning it over to Junie Hoang. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us some characters that you've done that people may have heard you from.
Hi there, my name is Junie Hoang, and I have been doing animes for a while before I started segueing into doing other acting jobs. But I started off doing animes. I've done about 15 different episodic animes.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually I moved into doing voiceovers for industrials and films and dubbing TV series from other countries into English. So a little bit of mishmash of everything.
Okay, great. And then are there any notable characters that people might have recognized you from certain animes?
I think that my probably most well-known anime that I've done is Street Fighter 2V. And I did Chun-Li. That was actually my most well-known but most favorite character because she does a lot of screaming and fighting and action. And I find that those are more dynamic to do than just straight dialogue. So that is by far my favorite one. But I love all of them because they're all different. Every character is different. Every episode, TV series is special and unique in its own way. But my favorite ones are the action ones, the fighting sequences.
Yeah, I bet you have a lot of freedom over kind of how the character and the direction goes. But before we dive more into your characters, kind of tell us a little bit of a background about yourself and what kind of inspired you to want to try to be voice acting. I was looking a little bit into your background and your career, and I saw that initially you didn't start off wanting to become like a voice actor. You were going into school. You were in vet school. So what kind of was that transition for you?
Yeah, that was for my mom.
Okay.
I originally started. I liked school, so I loved high school. I went into college and I originally studied psychology, which was, my dad was very big into the social studies, the liberal arts, but my mom was more into science. So I tried to compromise and I found a science that I really loved, which is Biomedical Science. And I love animals, so I got a degree from the College of Veterinary Medicine. But I also love biology and how it relates to health and disease. Mm-hmm. So I got my BS in Biomedical Science from the College of Veterinary Medicine, but my true love has always been the liberal arts. And eventually I got out. I did some volunteering at a hospital. I worked in a lab. I worked with Medicaid, and it was great, but it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So then I started pursuing the liberal arts. I started going into dance. Was always my first love since I was in high school. So I went back to studying dance, and then it segued into acting, and that's pretty much what I've been doing since I left college.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that was even though that you were going to school for veterinary medicine, that was something in the back of your head that you've always were really, passionate about.
Yeah, actually it was, my mom wanted me to be a doctor. Imagine that. An Asian mom wanted me to be a doctor. But so originally I thought, I had this really naive vision that I was going to be a doctor full time, and then in my extra time I would be an actor, but it's impossible. You can't do it.
Yeah. Did you do any side gigs at all throughout school? Were you part of any liberal arts clubs or plays during college?
In college, I really focused on school. I did take some dance classes when I was in college, but I really didn't go 100% for it until after I left. So it was into my 20s that I started really focusing 100% on it. But, while you're in school studying science, it just consumes all your time. And it's really hard because it's a hard field to go into, science. And so I didn't, it was either one or the other, and I wanted to finish one before I started the other.
Okay, no, it makes sense. I know. I can imagine that the science, the medical field is definitely not like a communications type major or something. You invest a lot of your time into it.
So many different careers you can go into in the medical field, whereas in the performing arts, you have acting, singing, dancing. It's very, it's just more of a challenge, I think.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense, especially when, there is so many different avenues to be part of liberal arts. And, I guess you have to capture whatever, is most interested for you in order to step in. So kind of taking a little bit of a step back, what was that ultimate, I guess, interest or inspiration that wanted you to become part of the liberal arts area?
I fell in love with dance when I was in high school, and it was a passion. But then when I graduated from high school, I was like, well, what do I study? And I just followed in the footsteps of all my brothers and sisters, and they were all into science. So my brother and my sister were doctors. My other brother studied accounting. So it just didn't make sense at the time for me to do something completely wayward and out of the ordinary. But I found that when I ended up studying something really for someone else, it doesn't work out, because eventually you always find your path and your way back to doing something that you love,
sure,
which is what you should do. Although I love biology, I love animals, I love science, I'm not big on math. I'm not big on math, and I'm not big on chemistry, although I was very good at organic chemistry. But your basic Chem 101, it was hard for me. And physics was so-and-so.
Yeah.
But it's using a different side of your brain. I think the performing arts use the left side and the science uses the right side, is what they say. So it's having to find that balance. Of course, being in the medical field is so much more, it's important, as you can tell today in today's world, how important it is to be a healthcare worker and to be a doctor or a nurse. It's very important. And that was one of the reasons why I said, I'm going to try to do the medical field full time and then just do acting in my spare time, but it just didn't work out that way. But definitely I have a very high respect for people in the healthcare field, especially, as you see it now, it takes a pandemic for people to realize
really appreciate
how important and essential people in the healthcare, the frontline workers are. And you're so grateful that there are people who have that dedication.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, I know the medical field is very, a lot of dedicated people, a lot of many years studying, hard hours, very involved in their field of study. And I know, often there's there could be controversies around healthcare and medicine and how it's handled, versus like in the United States and elsewhere. But in the end of the day, that these are people who have worked very hard, their whole lives, and they go put a lot of school in, a lot of effort, and they get paid a certain wages because that they're we're relying on them to really hold up that whole industry. So it's definitely something not to take lightly for people. And you're right. You know what? It's one of those things where now that we're in a pandemic, now everyone's really realizing like how important the strength of the medical medicine industry is.
And the people that we've taken for granted, the people that work at the grocery stores, the people that deliver your mail, we just kind of take it as in passing, like, oh, these are just everyday jobs. But you don't realize until COVID hit that these people, if it weren't for them doing these jobs, we wouldn't have been able to survive. How are you going to get your food? How are you going to get your prescriptions delivered? And you don't realize that the things that we take for granted are the most, you get back to the basics, the simple things. And these are the things that are important, and we just take it for granted because it's like, when you have running water, you don't really appreciate it until it's cut off. Yeah. You're like, oh, I can't live without it.
Yeah.
You're so used to having it and you don't appreciate it till it's gone.
Yeah, oh, that's definitely true. So kind of a little bit of a segue from, your background of going to school for medicine and really longing for, some sort of, a career or at least involvement in the liberal arts. I heard you were doing dancing. So what kind of made you say, I'm going to give voice acting a try?
Well, I kind of fell into it because I originally started off in Houston, and Houston is more theater, and you really have to dig hard to find work that's more film and TV as opposed to theater. So I happened to fall into it because I started acting in 1995, and what was available to me in Houston was voiceover. They had a company called ADV Films, and they did dubbing for animes from Japan, and it was what was available to me. So that's how I started off doing voiceovers, and for me it was what was out there, and I tried it and I loved it, and it paid well, and I was like, hey, this is great. Yeah. And I didn't realize until I got to LA how competitive it was. Voiceover in Los Angeles is so competitive. To get an agent, to get the work, it's a whole different, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about being challenged. How I was comparing how competitive it is to be in the health field as opposed to the performing arts field. And what I meant by challenging is that it's more competitive. To try to compete, there's so many. You could submit for one job in acting and they will get 2,000 actors submitting for that one job, and the job could be one line. Sure. Or it could just be a featured role, but then there are thousands of people competing for that one role. So in that sense, it's very competitive. And I imagine it's just as competitive trying to get into med school. My niece is trying to get into med school, and everything now is, you have more people, less jobs, and just, I think in any field, it's going to be competitive.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that, there being a little bit more of, a supply and demand issue when it comes to acting, versus medicine, especially when I think there's a little bit of not a little bit, but, there's probably a lot higher barrier of entry to get into medicine. So it kind of cuts out most of the supply. But then when it comes to something, around acting or voiceover, it's kind of subjective in that sense, right? Of who's the listening person on the other side, what do they want? What's their character? What's their objective? And it's not really a matter of, hey, did you go? What was your credentials school-wise? They're really going to listen through all the auditions and be like, I want to talk to these people because they kind of match my vision for, the character or the actor or moving forward. So.
And voiceover is there's pros and cons to doing voiceover, and there's pros and cons to doing on-camera work. When you're doing voiceover, all you have is your voice. And that's all they judge you on. So they don't care what you look like. Sure. You come in with no makeup, they don't care. It's all based on your voice. And that's, to me, I think that's a pro, because then you're not weighted down by being self-conscious about the way you look. But then there's also the problem when you're doing a voiceover. All you are is a person in a room. So there's no outside stimulus to motivate you. There's no other person to react to. There's no props. There's no, you kind of have to imagine the whole scene in your head and then play it out in front of a microphone in a padded room. Whereas if you're doing film and TV, yes, you're conscious about the way you look, and that could be a con. But the pro is you have all these other things that could help you along with your performance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
balancing out and which way you feel most comfortable. So I want to talk about one thing that you mentioned, because sometimes I guess everyone I've spoken to has a little bit of a different opinion on this, and maybe kind of shedding some of your insight on this is the matter of California and LA and needing to be there to progress. I've had some people who've said to kind of start and build the foundation of your career locally first and try to get your footing, and then naturally going to California to almost, explore those bigger opportunities because it's more plentiful for that field. Then I've had other people suggest, hey, look, it's not really working out. It might not work out where you are. You might as well start fresh from there and then work your way up, because then at least you're starting to make the connections, versus having that framework. What would be, I guess, your advice to somebody new trying in, and which would be the path that they should go to?
Well, I was in Houston for 10 years doing acting before I even made that move to LA. So did acting from about 1995 to 2005, 2006. And then I finally moved to LA. So I had a resume built up. And a third of it, of course, was voiceover work. But I've taken classes before I went to LA, and they said there's 3 things you should have: money, money, a car, and a place to live. And of course, if you have money, you have the other 2,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But I know a lot of people that just kind of jump in and they're like, oh, I have a passion. I'm getting in my Volkswagen Beetle and I'm going there. And I've had friends that moved there and they lived out of their car. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's not the way I would go, because I guess because I come from a really, I don't come from a very spontaneous family. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to pick up and go. I'm the type of person that likes to plan things out. And
Sure.
I like to have schedules and lists and know what's going to happen. It's real hard for me to just on a whim go. So for me, I felt like I had to plan it. Some people I know just up and go and it works out well for them. It just depends on.
That's not the norm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not the safe way to go, but some people do it and they're successful at it. So I think it really just depends on the person. For me, I like to plan it out a little bit.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I'm kind of the same way, where like my friends and family, they'll laugh at me like whenever I need to plan or visualize something out. Like I'll break out an Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, okay, this is what's going to happen, and here's my costs, and here are my expenses, and kind of structure it out. Yeah, but I always laugh. It's funny, you mentioning people kind of go on a whim. And not necessarily. Obviously, we can always find the people who are go, and they're the ones who we'll call it. They'll go on a whim, and they'll end up there, and then they're actually successul. But that's that could be far and wide between. And I think most of them go and they don't have that plan, and they'll kind of get stuck. And I remember when I used to live in California, I lived in South and North. I was working in the IT tech industry over there. And I remember I always had like an inside joke with my friends, like if I would be making small talk with, either your local barista or someone in a grocery store or something. And I would say everybody I would meet had something like, right now I'm a barista, but I'm working on a screenplay, or, hey, right now I'm working over here, but I'm currently going to be, my next step is I have this new demo tape that I want to, push to acting agencies. And I thought that was kind of funny because it kind of, to me, it's a little nerve-wracking because I want that level of, okay, I got this, now I'm going to move. So it could be like a tough transition for some people. And some people might, strive in and do well.
Like I said, it depends on the person. Some people work really well doing things spontaneously because they're flowing with it. And then some people, if they don't have a blueprint, they just
don't know what to do.
Yeah. So like I said, each person is different.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for variety. So
yeah, and you can kind of mix it that way. So let's I know you said, before kind of moving into California and some other opportunities you took on, what was your first, in at least in your eyes, like what was your first gig into saying, oh wow, like now I'm doing something serious, or now I'm actually working my way into the space here?
It's funny, how people always say, well, what was your big break? And I always think when people say big break, I'm thinking, okay, you've made it, you've become a household name. But if you're a working actor and you're not a household name, I'm not sure if there is such a thing as a big break, because every project that you do is technically a big break because you meet people on that project and then it leads to other work. and, you know, someone meets you on a gig, they give you another job, and it kind of snowballs. So I think every project in a way is a big break because it opens the doors for future work. You could take it that way, or you could say big break, meaning you are completely unknown, and then all of a sudden you're a lead in a big blockbuster movie, and that's a big break too. So I think it's perception of what you think a big break is. For me, I'm not a household name. So for me, every job that I get that leads to another job is a big break.
Gotcha.
You know.
Oh, makes sense. Well, I guess maybe to rephrase it a little bit is in terms of, you know, naturally working up your career and if you want to call, you know, the big breaks in the sense of getting into the field. But was there any specific role that you took on that was like, oh wow, like I'm actually a voice actor now, or I'm actually making, you know, this to be a real career. Really, it's always kind of like spontaneous.
You know what? I never feel like I've broken through. I still feel like every day is still a hustle. I feel like every job is, I just never feel like I'm there.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. I remember, you know, some people will, I was speaking with, you know, someone not too long ago, and she was telling me that, you know, sometimes I'm doing good. I have like back-to-back contracts. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really great. And then other times I'm like, what am I doing? You know, I have the work, you know, like what's next? Yeah. So I was kind of, it's always funny to hear like, you know, some similarities in that sense.
It's a very manic profession because when you could wake up and feel like you're on top of the world, and then you go to bed and you're like, oh man, my career sucks. And it's so dependent on the things that happen to you. I mean, and it can flip and change on a dime. So I never really feel like, oh, I can relax now, I've made it. I've never felt that way. I always felt like, all right, now I gotta get the next gig and the next gig. Yeah, and really I just like to work. So I like to keep busy, and I'm not, you know how they always say, oh, you should pick and choose what kind of work you do and which projects you like. But for me, my enjoyment comes from booking jobs and keeping busy. And to me, that's fulfillment. Sure. You know, I mean, how many times are you going to be given a job where they pay you to do what you love to do, and then you say, no, I'm not going to do that. It's, you know, the script's not right, or I can't work with this person or that person. I just think that every job is a blessing. And if someone's paying you to do what you love to do, why find ways to get out of the job, right? Unless it's really something that you don't believe in, or you really don't like this certain person. Mm-hmm. I just think if you're given an opportunity to do what you love to do, you know, I try not to go to bed thinking, oh man, I wish I could have booked this big film or this TV show. I go to bed and I think, hey, you know, I did an industrial today, and I'm glad someone gave me an opportunity to do something I love to do and pay me for it. And then I get to meet new people. And I guess it just depends on what your short-term and what your long-term goals are.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. A couple episodes ago, we were talking to Mike Pollock, and he's the voice of Eggman and Sonic. And he actually mentioned, I think this is, you know, a good line of advice. And I think it kind of goes into the direction of what you're saying too, is, you know, being an up and coming actor or up and coming voice actor in that field is, he said, you know, I was asking him in terms of like, what are some common mistakes, or what do you think are some common things that people go after? And he was saying turning down jobs that aren't, you know, quote unquote sexy in that sense. Or he said, you know, there's advertisers, standard advertisers need voiceover too, and he's like, plumbing commercials needs voice actors too. And he goes, there's a lot of work there. It might not be that big movie or that big show or that big thing you wanted to do, but going after those roles can help you build that foundation. And it sounds like that's kind of at least where you are too, where it's like, yes, even though I'm not, you know, in this big thing I want to be in, or where I'm working towards at the moment, I'm grateful that somebody out there, you know, chose me for this opportunity, and, you know, going from there.
Yeah, and it prevents you from being rusty. I've had friends who are like, okay, I've joined the union, I'm in SAG, but I'm only going to do these big TV shows or films, and then they never get in front of the camera. And then when they're given the opportunity, they don't know what to do with it because they're just frozen. Sure. You know, so you have to, your acting is like a muscle. Keep at it, keep practicing, keep rehearsing, and use you know, a lot of actors take classes, and classes are great, but you know what? Being on a set is the best teacher. And what I do is every set that I can get on, even if it's for an industrial or a little commercial, to me, that's like a class. So I learn from it, and it prevents me from getting out of whack. You know, I fine tune everything I'm doing, whether I'm on set or whether I'm doing an audition or a table read or just rehearsing a scene with somebody. Use that as something to prevent you from getting squeaky. You don't want to be like the Tin Man, you know, as I was squeaking. You know, you want to oil your joints, right? Yeah,
no, definitely makes sense. So let's kind of talk a little bit about, you know, jumping into anime and some of your anime career too. You know, naturally, I know you mentioned beforehand, you know, I guess people most known you for Chun-Li in the Street Fighter. So kind of talk to us a little bit about that experience and the character, and what were some of the directions kind of given, and what did you kind of, you know, add to the character in the voice acting process?
Well, Chun-Li was a very hyper character in the sense that she's complete action. So I found like I would do hours of her voice, and then by the end of it, my voice was really, because, you know, you do take after take. And really when I did her, I probably did at most 2 or 3 takes, because I'd go into the booth and they would show you the actual picture. They show you the scene that she's in, because I did the dubbing for it. So originally the voice was in Japanese. So they show you the picture and the scene that she's in, and then you're just sitting there, you're standing there in the room, and you're watching the scene, and you're watching the lips move. So what you want to do is you want to time your voice and your screams and your ha, you know, all those little fight sounds they make. You want to sync it in with her actual body movement. So I think the challenge of doing her is because she's all over the place. She's fighting, she's screaming, she's yelling. It's timing it all so that when she screams, you're screaming. And then when she's doing dialogue, you have to make it sink in with her lips. So really, she's the boss, because she's telling you
how to do it.
Well, yeah, so it was a lot of fun. But I find those characters actually much easier to do. And also it's the tone of your voice has to match the mood and the tone of the scene. So it's you have to balance everything out, the volume, and of course they can control that when they do sound mixing, but it's about controlling the volume, setting the tone, and sometimes when you see it on screen, you can actually play it out. I mean, it feels a little silly, but you can actually play it out as you're doing the voice, and that helps a lot too.
And I'm sure that helps like embody the character emotions and whatnot that you're kind of seeing, you know, on screen as well.
Yeah, you're kind of doing the same movement she's doing, except she's doing it in anime and you're doing it in real life. But that's the only way to get,
you're punching and kicking in the booth, and you'll kick something, you're like, ow.
And that's the only way to make it true to what she's doing, is you have to do the thing she's doing in the booth to get that same energy.
That's kind of, it's kind of funny, you know, you're mentioning about that she didn't really have too many like dialogue lines. It was more the action and the kicking and the sound effects and everything. Because when we were kind of looking through and getting some of these questions together, I have 1 or 2 people kind of helping me get that all together, and she was looking up like voice clips to kind of get, you know, at least an idea of your voice. But she goes, I can't find anything. It's all action scenes. It's all fighting scenes. I'm like, I think that's the point. I think that's
that character. Yeah. There's been other characters that I've done, that don't even require any fighting. So you just they're not as well known as that TV series, but I've done Bubblegum Crisis. I don't know if you've heard of that one. I'm not sure if you're big into anime, but like Compiler, Macross, Martian Successor Nadesco, a lot of those characters don't have fighting, and it's more straight talking.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes, they'll do a lot of looping where they want a crowd of voices, and then they use your voice and they dub it in with a bunch of other voices. So there have been times where I've done episodes where I've done multiple voices for different characters in the same episode.
Oh, wow.
So you just kind of change it up a little bit.
So it's kind of funny to hear, you talk about some of the things that you've done in anime, and I remember, so some other folks who joined us too, they were saying one of obviously the challenge of the anime is there's kind of that pros and cons level again, right? Sometimes you're voicing, or someone's explaining a scene to you, and you need to really use your imagination to kind of picture what that is, and then they'll take your voice and put it in afterwards. With anime, obviously, it's a little bit different because you're dubbing the anime, and you actually have something to work off of, so you can kind of see do it. And I would always laugh that they were saying sometimes the hardest, or at least when you're reading through your lines, they were saying sometimes the best feeling is when you get like mouth not seen, or so you just do it. You don't need to worry about you're matching the lips or anything. Sometimes they could be off camera, but they hear your voice, and then you don't have to worry about syncing it up. But that's also the fun challenge of doing voiceovers, is to get that sync. And when you get it, it feels so good. So what are some... Oh, sorry, there was a little bit of a delay. I thought you stopped. My apologies.
Nope, I'm good.
It lagged for a second. So you answered it and you paused. So it's my bad. But I was gonna say, kind of finishing your thought about, when you get it, it feels good. And then, you kind of move into the direction of, whatever that character is embodying. So kind of going off of some of the best characters, or just some of you kind of naming some other animes, what have been your favorite animes to play off of? And do you sometimes, what is your way into learning about the character, or trying to build your style per each character?
Actually, what was really interesting was there were some, it was a while ago, but I forgot what European country it was, but they sent us 3 different TV shows. I think it was but they were real people. So they had real people doing different languages, and we had to dub it in English. And that is actually even harder than anime, because anime, you just have this mouth going like this, right?
Yeah.
It's a cartoon. But when you have a real person that you have to dub the lines, that's harder, because that's actually a real mouth that you have to sync up with. And I've done that before, and that's more challenging. I think the last one I did was for an Indian film. It was called Nish. I'm not even going to pronounce it because I know I'm not going to pronounce it right. But it was an Indian film.
I'll have the text pop up somewhere on the screen.
Nishad Bomb, I think was the name of it. But it was an Indian film, and they had Michael Madsen in the film. So I voiced a couple of different characters in the film, because it was weird. I think it was already in English, but then they wanted it redubbed, maybe because the quality wasn't, what it was, or maybe they wanted the voice different.
Better match the accents,
Yeah, it was already in English. So then I redubbed it in English. And so then I had to really sync it up, because I was saying the exact same lines.
Got it. That's tough because then you don't really have much room to play around with words, because and then in anime at least, if there's like a word, or if their mouth stops moving, I'm sure there's some collaboration. Okay, maybe we'll kind of work.
Yeah, you can move it around, right? Exactly. You can move the sound around. But with a real person speaking, you gotta hit it exactly the way they hit it, because you're saying, I think that was probably, that was very fun and very challenging, because I had to sync up every word exactly to their word. I'm not even sure I answered your question. No, you did. Just the different challenges and stuff around what you do. But, from there, I know you've also done, different movies and TV shows as well, from, Fifth Ward, Until We Meet Again. So being some of your some recent stuff as well. At least, from you, like what's that difference? I know you were kind of mentioning before, like, hey, there's the pros and cons. If I'm doing voiceover, I don't really need to be too concerned about, what I look like and everything. It's really just me in the booth and I'm in the character, and I really just need to get in my mindset. I guess acting and that level of, obviously you need to act in both, but being in front of a camera kind of brings a whole new, slew of challenges. So have you found, I know, at least from your IMPD and some other sources, there's been a lot of you jump around in between the two, and sometimes people find room for comfort, but it seems at least you found a path to grow in both areas, right? So is there a preference that you have? What are some of the the pros that you see in on camera acting that aren't present in voice acting? Man, I love every job that I get, but I do love independent films because I've kind of grown up on them. What I like about independent films is that they're on a certain budget constraint, and the more budget constraint they're on, the more creative they get, because they have to make it for less money.
Yeah.
Really get... they become so intelligent with how they do things, because they're like, okay, we only have this much money, so we gotta make it work for this amount of money, and this is what we're trying to achieve, and we don't have millions of dollars to play with. And that's when you really see people at their best, because they're bringing out all their raw talents to make it work. And I think that's why I love doing independent films, because you get this intimate cast and crew, and they know what they've got to work with, and you have to work with each other really well. All the pieces have to get along to complete the puzzle. So there's a sense of community when you do a independent film. It's like a little family that comes together.
Sure.
And then they create the project, and then they break apart. But in the time that they're there, it's almost like, how you get lost when you do a big production. You get lost because you're just kind of one part of a huge cast and crew, and sometimes you feel like sometimes they may not even know your name. Yeah. They might know your character before they even know your name. But on an independent film, everybody knows everybody, and you have to. Because
I'm sure definitely when I said I guarantee that definitely when there's more people involved, kind of you're right, with that smaller type of budget, everyone's kind of like a jack of all trades. There's everyone's contributing in some way, shape, or form. It's not just you kind of waiting around to reach some lines and everything. So
and when you're on a small budget, you would be surprised at how many different talents people have. They do this and they're like, oh, you need help with this? I can help you do this. And then all kinds of things come out from people that you would be surprised. And then also what I do like about working on a independent film is that part of the crew ends up being actors. We don't have enough actors, throw in some crew people. And I love it when I go to a screening of a film and I see the crew people acting in the film, and it's not because they're trying to be actors, it's because, hey, we don't have actors. Exactly. Throw them in there, so it's nice to see people, small group of people, like you said, everyone's jack of all trades and wearing different hats.
Sure. And I guess that kind of comes to a point where it's not really about, the status or the money. It's just kind of purely just a bunch of people who love and then want to make a movie or a show.
Yeah. They hit the ground running, and everyone's goal is to make the film as best as it can be.
So as far as in terms of movies and everything, has there favorite genres that you like to work on? I think I saw some horror movie poster in the background before.
Horror.
That's
horror
your favorite
is my thing. Was
that a horror movie poster on the side? When you moved your camera before, that's what I thought I saw.
No, that was actually Sex Pistols.
Oh, okay.
And
I saw the bottom left. I'm like, it looks like one of the old school 80s,
or something.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I love horror. I'm kind of a very strange. I'm drawn to very dark things. I'm heavy onto drama, heavy into dark things. I remember the first book that I read. I was in elementary school, and everybody was reading, elementary school books. And I think the first book that I finished was The Amityville Horror.
Oh, wow.
And I read that when I was about 10 years old. And I read it from beginning to end. And the book is actually better than the movie, I think. And I remember when I was in elementary school, the first movie I saw was The Exorcist. I was 10 years old. And it's weird to me when people are in their 20s and their 30s and they say, "Oh, I still can't watch that movie." I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I love horror movies. I'm a big horror movie fanatic too.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah,
what was the first horror movie you saw in theaters?
Oh, geez. The first horror movie I saw in theaters.
You have to think back.
I have to go way back. I'm going to ask you the same question now. That's a good question. Jeez. I'm trying to remember. Ghost Ship.
It had to been a
Ghost Ship.
Ghost Ship?
So that's the first movie I saw, and then the other one was Ghost Ship, and that was the first quote-unquote horror
Ghost
movie
Ship was
I saw.
good.
And then
you're talking about the one with Juliana Margulies, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was a long time ago. And then I also saw
movie.
When I was little, when I was small, I was a little kid, the first horror movie I saw that terrified me was The Ring. That was the one that drove me crazy. The Ring with Samara with the long black hair.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a kid, I was 10, 11, and after seeing it, because I love horror stuff, and I checked it out. At the time, actually, now that I think about it, I didn't even see the full version of The Ring. I saw Scary Movie 3, the parody version, and I was still terrified.
So you saw the comedy version of The Ring.
Yeah. When I was a kid, but the way she looked, and then the drapes and all, and that was always the scary version. But I've seen The Ring. I've seen all of the Friday the 13th movies, all the Halloweens.
So you're
I
a
like
fan.
the old school movies more so, my opinion. But what about you?
Yeah,
What was the very first movie you saw, a horror movie you've seen in theaters?
It was An American Werewolf in London.
Okay,
and
that's a classic.
I couldn't get in because I was too young, so I made my dad go take me to watch it. And it might have been. It's not exactly a film that you want to see with your dad. But I had to go watch it. I couldn't get in because I was too young.
Yeah, we did when I was in high school, we would always, we'll sneak into the different movies, and our trick was always, we would go in, and we would always be like, oh, my dad or my mom's up there, and then they'd be like, where? And I would just wave, and I would keep waving until eventually somebody would wave back. I'm like, they're right there. That's where they are. So
that's smart.
Yeah, we just keep waving
really
and waving.
Smart.
So, but yeah, no, I love horror movies. I would say my top 3 favorite series. I love Saw. Saw is really good. Evil Dead is also really good.
Did you see the remake of Evil Dead? Was that not one of the best remakes?
Oh, it was really good.
Remakes are usually not good in horror, but I have to say, The Evil Dead was an excellent remake. I had never seen so much. That movie, it's one of those movies where they really know how to make you, some of the things they did were just so, you know how when you watch horror and the way they do stuff to people, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Hostel, but much more graphic.
Yeah. Well, with that movie in particular, the Evil Dead remake, I think one of the reasons why it did well is at least because the Evil Dead, now at least, in terms of how the movie kind of became the TV show, it started off as like a horror and then it kind of evolved into more of a dark comedy in a way, with Ash Williams and Bruce Campbell and kind of going in that direction. So I felt that when they did the remake,
it was no comedy at all.
Exactly. I was about to say, because normally people hate remakes because they're comparing it to the original movie. They're like, oh, I wish it was like this. I wish it was like this. And don't get me wrong. I know it kind of goes back to where Sam Raimi and you kind of have the budget and they're being creative and they could do a lot more now that they have some backing behind it. They're making a new Evil Dead movie, actually. It's supposed to come out. You mean a
sequel?
Kind of within that same realm of movies. Yeah. But those are good.
It's hard when you have a cult classic horror movie and you try to turn it into a TV series or a remake. You can never compare the original with a remake. But there have been some good remakes. I don't know if they're as good as the original, but...
Yeah. So what's your favorite horror series all time?
Horror series?
Mm-hmm.
You know what's strange? I'm not a fan of watching horror TV series. But
I meant more of a franchise, I guess. Not really a TV show.
Oh, not TV show.
I'm not big on any big horror TV show either, to be honest with you.
I think Halloween.
Halloween's a classic.
Yeah. Friday the 13th is kind of repetitive.
They're just different. They're different. Like I always joke because I like both of them. And my personal preferences, I'm always like Jason, but I still really love Halloween also. And everyone always tells me like, aren't they just two guys killing each other? I said, no. The difference is in Halloween, you have Michael Myers and he's chasing Jamie Lee Curtis and you're rooting for her to live. You want her to live. You want her to be okay. I was like, in Friday the 13th, you're rooting for Jason to kill people. Like that's like the reverse because it's like a bunch of really rotten people that you want to die.
I always root for the bad guy in the horror movies though.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to hear this. It's a Halloween story I actually have for you. When I had decided to move to LA, the reason I had gone at the time that I did was because I knew they were remaking Halloween. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'm going to move to LA because Halloween was my favorite movie and I'm going to go audition for Halloween. So I came out to LA. And of course, I, like everyone else, thought it was so easy to get cast in LA. And I went out there. I tried to get an agent manager so I could get to audition for the movie. And I tried, couldn't get in. And then finally one day I went to Target and I happened to have my headshots and resumes with me because I was buying some envelopes for them. And I left the car. I went back to the car. I said, I better bring my headshot. You never know who you're going to run into. I'm in LA, right?
Sure.
So I go back into the Target and I'm with a friend and I have my headshot and resumes. I'm walking around, right? So he goes over there and he gives him my headshot. He says, hey, my friend is a huge fan of yours and she'd love to audition for your joint. And so he's with Sherry Moon Zombie. They're like pushing around a Target cart. And he takes the headshot resume and he folds it up into 4 and he puts it in his back pocket. And he says, tell your friend to call Monica Mickelson Cassie on Monday and tell her Rob Zombie said she can audition for Halloween. And so that happened on a weekend, Friday. And then on Monday, I called the office. I said, yeah, Rob Zombie said I can audition. And she was like, well, we get a lot of these stories, right? And she said, I have to verify it with him before I let you audition. And I was like, oh God, I don't know if he's going to remember me because I couldn't tell. Maybe he was drinking or something, might not remember me. And so she called me back like a day or two later. She said, okay, Rob Zombie verified that he, ran into you at Target and he said you can audition for Halloween. So I got to read for it, which was the reason why I came to LA at the time I did, was to audition for that film.
Wow.
Couldn't do it, and then ran into the director and got to read for it. So
that's crazy. That's a
really
weird
story.
Yeah, that's a really funny story.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you feel about the latest Halloween, the 2018 version?
The one that Rob Zombie did?
No, the previous one.
The one with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep, yeah, the one that just came out, the latest one, the 2018 version of it.
There's only one thing that I can't get past, and you know how you're supposed to have like suspension of disbelief and you just have to go with the flow, but there's one thing that kind of took me out of it, and it was everyone aged, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, Jamie Lee Curtis's character is in her 60s, right, in the film? And I'm like, okay, Michael Myers is got to be in his 60s, and I'm like, at what point does he stop? Does he cease to become the boogeyman? And at what point does he become just like a 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old guy?
Man, yeah.
So that was the only thing that kind of took me out of the boogeyman thing. Was I was like, when they showed him and they showed how old he was, and he had the gray beard, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not really Michael Myers anymore. This isn't the boogeyman. This is just some 60-year-old dude trying to kill his sister.
That's funny.
And so it made me think, well, does he have...
You're looking for scenes for him, like, holding his back or something, like, as he's getting up. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, is he still invincible? Can you still shoot him 8 times and he can still get up? Or is he really aging like a regular person? And that was the only thing that I was like, because in the original Halloween, he's invincible, right? You shoot him, you set him on fire, you poke out his eyes, you do all these things, and he never dies. But in this one, he had a more kind of mortal aspect to him, which I'm not sure if that's what they wanted, or I don't know. What's your interpretation?
Yeah, no, I mean, so what they did with this movie, because Halloween is broken up into like 4 different trees, right? It has like 4 different timelines. So it's you have Halloween 1. I don't know if you knew this, so when John Carpenter made the character of Michael Myers, he for his franchise of like what he was going for, he wasn't trying to do like a continuation. What he wanted to do was each Halloween movie was its own story. So he wanted to make it like an overarching umbrella. So movie number 1 was Halloween, and then movie number 2 was supposed to be something different, and going from there. So he makes Halloween number 1 and he makes Halloween number 2, and then Halloween 3, and this is like, I guess, a fun fact.
Season of the Witch?
Yes, it has nothing to do with Michael Myers. Nothing at all, because of what I was saying. He wanted to do that branching story. So he didn't want to do it anymore, so he leaves. So then in those 4, 5, and 6, those movies, that's where all that supernatural stuff came to be about Michael Myers, and that he's invisible, and
with the little girl.
Yeah, exactly. And he gets shot like 1,000 times, and so on the sidelines, John Carpenter this whole time has been very like, I could make a better Halloween than this. I could do it better. Then he sees, I don't know if you remember like the H2O, where they kind of started off with like, which is supposed to be Halloween number 1, number 2, H2O direction. So then this movie we just saw, the 2018 one, is just the first movie and then that movie. So everything.
Right. It actually picks up. So it picks up right after the first movie, right? Yeah. So it kind of like erases everything. It's like, okay, none of that other stuff happened. So they were going with that moral thing, but you're right that if they're going with all moral, then you have age plays a picture in there where he's much older, and he's not supernatural, he's just a man, and it's like it's kind of tough to wrap your head around. There was only one thing I didn't understand about the Halloween franchise, if you can explain to me. I never understood, I think it was in Halloween 5, who was the guy that got off the bus in the black boots, and he freed Michael Myers from prison, from the jail.
In the later movies, and this was The Curse of Michael Myers, right? So The Curse of Michael Myers was focused on his powers, like where's his powers coming from? And remember, it focuses on that cult. So he has like the cult of Thorn, basically. So Michael Myers has the Cult of Thorn, and in order to activate it, you have to you kill your family or whatever. So this guy was supposed to be like one of the cult's leaders or something, and they basically use him as like a way to explain this is how Michael Myers broke free. Obviously, this is how he got the cult mark in the first place when he was in jail. When he was in jail initially, it's like in like 3 sentences. So and then remember, I guess a big thing in Halloween 1, everyone's like, how does he know how to drive? He's been arrested for all this time. Like, where does he know how to drive? And he's been in jail, or he's been, so the guy he alludes to the fact that he taught him how to drive, and he gave him the mark and all that stuff. It's not very well explained, but that's kind of what it is. But
because I felt like I thought they threw him in there just to keep the series going, but I didn't realize that they actually referenced who he was in the movie.
Correct. Yeah, but
because I thought, they're just trying to throw another bad guy to keep the series going, and the next Halloween will be about this bad guy, And I didn't realize that. I've watched each one of those films dozens of times, and I never picked up on that.
Do you know the little girl too in Halloween 5 and 6?
Jamie? Was it Jamie?
The little girl with the black hair.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the same girl that gets casted in the Rob Zombie ones too. And you know what's weird? Because I saw that little girl in 4 and 5, when I saw her again in the remake, and then she had nudity, I still felt like she was that little girl. It just didn't. It didn't just fall in my head. So I have a funny Halloween story for you too. That I'll come to some closing questions for you. My fiance. So I used to. I'm in my home office right now. So to my left, this way, I used to have a 6.5 foot Michael Myers animatronic in my office. So we had this big animatronic, so we got it for Halloween. So in my house, I was always very decorative and Halloween, and it was a big holiday for me. I would go crazy. So I'll have to send you a video or two. I have a Ring video doorbell. So when all the kids would come up for Halloween, Michael Myers would move at them, and they would all jump back. So that was my rejoicing. I'm like, yes, but when I got it, the first year I got it, my fiance was pregnant. So we had I set it up, and it's very tall. So it's like, if you don't know it's there, it's kind of like setting you back, because it's kind of eerie that it's like 6.5, 7 feet tall in the house. So and then when you trigger the motion sensor, exactly. And then when you trigger the motion, he starts going like this with the knife, and then the John Carpenter theme song starts playing. So the first couple weeks we had it, I would move it around the house. So if we would go into the kitchen, I would kind of put it on a corner, or so she would hate me for it. So for the entire month of October, the song. So then when our baby was born, I was laughing because we were trying to find different songs and stuff, because we were reading online that says, if the newborn's having problems sleeping, were there any songs, or if there's any music, or are there any shows that you watched while pregnant that they can recognize, and then at least they'll feel more at home in the womb, if you will, right? So we were playing different songs, what about when we were on that one trip and we played this, or what if we went on vacation and we played that? So I said, I have an idea. So my son's crying, and we put on the Halloween theme song, and he just passes out. And it was so for 2-3 months, we would literally go in his room, and he'd be crying, and I would play the Halloween
theme song. Which theme song was it? The theme song from the movie? Because there's 2 or 3 theme songs.
The main theme song.
The one with the piano solo.
Yeah, exactly. The piano solo one. So it was just hysterical. I was like, should I be concerned that he's falling asleep?
Well, because it's familiarity. The sound.
So it was just a funny thing. Yeah. So I was laughing because I was like, oh, this is the songs. I'll have to send you a video of my doorbell of just kids coming up and him kind of lunging at them. It's really funny. I had that one, and then Pennywise as well.
I have a lot of Pennywise Funko Pops, but I also have a 3-foot, it's like a 3-4 foot Michael Myers. Oh, and I hang him from the way I have him hung from the cabinet is his reflection is in the mirror of the bathroom. So when you shower, it looks like he's standing outside your bathroom door as you're showering.
That's scary. That's pretty cool. You're giving me ideas now, and I'm thinking it through now.
Well, you know what? You know, Guillermo del Toro, he, have you ever seen the show where he gives you a tour of his house? So he actually has a life-size exorcist, and it looks so real. And he props it up he has it in his living room, and he lets it sit on the chair like it's watching TV, and it looks exactly like the girl in the bed. That's creepy. And I could not do that. That's too much. I couldn't do that. But you know, I have met Linda Blair in real life. Really? And that must have been pretty surreal. That was exactly the word I was going to use, surreal, because she terrorized me when I saw her when I was 10 years old. And then when I met her a couple years ago at a horror convention, and I was taking a picture with her, it was just so weird because I'm like, wow, I'm actually standing next to the girl that was in that bed. And it was chilly, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I watched the film and I'm thinking, wow,
it's like something you don't believe it. You're just like, I've seen this person all my life. This was like one of my first favorite horror movies, and then
you meet him in person.
Now you're standing right next to me. So that's pretty crazy.
It's very weird. Yeah, she's always at those horror conventions taking pictures and signing autographs, and she does it to benefit her. She has she rescues dogs, and that's her charity. So she goes there to promote her charity organization.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a good cause. But I know we're coming up. I just looked at my watch. It's 4:10, so I don't want to keep you too long. On time wise.
When did we start? We started at
3. 2. Well, on the 2:00 your time, 3:00 my time.
Okay.
Yeah, but I kind of come to some closing questions. You know, I know we jumped around a little bit about your career, you know, yourself, and obviously some horror and some of your interests. So just to come to close, you know, if somebody was, you know, looking up to you or just looking for some advice as a new voice actor, you know, / actor, what would you give to them?
Man, I never feel like I'm in a position to give anybody any advice on anything. Because I always feel like I'm always in the learning process. But I would say that life is so short, and it can come and go so fast, and try to not take it so seriously to the point where it gets you depressed or gets you sad, because there's a lot of things in this business that can make you very sad and make you feel very alone. And just know that, and I know it's real easy to say because I say it all the time, but it doesn't mean that I practice what I preach, but I have to keep reminding myself that everybody's journey is different. And I'm sure, like I do, like everyone else, we compare our careers and we compare our paths and our successes. And things aren't always rosy for everyone that you think things are rosy for. And just know that we all have our ups and downs. And you're going to have your ups and downs, but it's not a destination, it's a journey, and try to enjoy yours. No one's going to have your boring journey. You know, so try to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, well, that's definitely some good advice. And I guess for people to try to find you, you know, for those social media or any upcoming projects for people to look out, you know, for you, you know, where can people find you, or where can they see you coming up in now?
I'm on everything. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Twitter, and there's not many people with my same name. So just search Junie Hoang, JUNIE HOANG. There's probably only one of me, but on Facebook, believe it or not, there's two of me.
Just make sure to find the right one.
Yeah. One's an actor, the other one has a real job. So, so I'm the one that's the actor, right? Yeah, so just type in my name and there should only be one of me. And if there isn't, then someone's either copying my account or it's someone ironically like Facebook with exactly my name. Great.
Well, I'll be able to make sure to put, all your social media links in the description. I'll put the right Junie, no worries. And then, for any new projects, definitely be on the lookout to support Junie on her voice acting journey and any new projects coming up away. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to follow us on Twitter at Hotline Sehwani and join our Discord community, link in the description. Also, follow Junie on social media to keep up with her recent projects.